Well, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Welcome to church. And if this is your first ever visit to LifePoint, I'm glad that you're here. And though I say so myself, I think you've picked a great day to come, because today we're starting a brand new series called Pain Management. And I want to start by showing you a photograph from the Philippines. Notice, please, the expression on this man's face. In an Asian culture where smiles come easily, this man gives every impression of being inconsolable. He is in this moment overwhelmed by the most agonizing of emotions. And when I look at this image, I want to ask questions. For example, I want to know, why is he looking at this particular pile of ruins? Is this the home in which his family once lived? Is this the street upon which his children once played? Where are they? Are they alive? Are they dead? Does he know? Next photo. In this image you can see a father holding his daughter. And when I look at the image, I immediately want to inquire as to the whereabouts of the mother. Is she missing? Was she killed? Does he know? Are her bloodied remains buried somewhere under all the wreckage, floating somewhere in all the dirty water? We don't know, but what we do know is that this man is inconsolable. He is in this moment overwhelmed by the most agonizing of emotions, all of which raises a question about the kind of God God is. Which of these propositions are true? Is it that God is all-powerful, but that he doesn't care about the people of the Philippines and therefore doesn't do anything to save them from this natural disaster? Or is it that God does care about the people of the Philippines, but that he isn't all-powerful and therefore can't save them from this natural disaster? And to a lesser extent, exactly the same question might be asked of your own personal disaster. The cancer, the bereavement, the loneliness, the tragedy, the constant stress of never having enough money, the sentence of disability that was so cruelly handed to your loved one, the depression that so skillfully robs you of your happiness. It all raises a question about the kind of God that God is. Is it that he can't help you? Or is it that he won't help you? Is it that he is unwilling to help you? Or is it that he is unable to help you? And if you're at all religiously inclined, either way the answer is terrifying, but nevertheless the question must be asked. Because to say that you believe in a God who is good is to say that you believe in something that is at odds with the realities of life in this world. Over the next few weeks at church, we're going to have a very honest look at one of the most honest parts of the Bible. It's called the Book of Psalms. And for those of you who don't know, Psalms is essentially a collection of ancient songs, many of which are profoundly sad. And what's interesting to me is that their sadness often verges on blasphemy. The words that we're going to read together over the next few weeks give the impression of being written in a rage. They give the impression of being written by a songwriter who is raising an angry and accusing fist to heaven and saying to God, "Where the hell are you? Now that I'm going through my own personal hell." So let's get to it. First sentence up on the screen, please, and we'll start our sorry work. As Roman said, I will take questions at the end, but I forewarn you, when we talk about pain in life, there are always far more questions than there are answers. And so I will feel your pain, but it's unlikely I'll have much wisdom to speak into it. So now that I've lowered that bar, let's move on. For those of you joining us on YouTube, we're looking at Psalm number 13 and verse 1. which begins with a rather vexing question. How long, Lord? How long? For a person who believes that God is good, even though life is not, this is one of the most pressing questions, because when your body is weakened by cancer, when your child is living with a disability, when something happens that causes your life to become a grinding hell, time takes on a destructive force. When your life gets overwhelmed with sadness, when tragedy happens, the hours of the day don't just pass by. They pass by abrasively, wearing you down, getting the better of you, making it hard, in fact, just to get through the hours of the day. And then when night comes and it's time to sleep, it gets worse. The ticking of the clock when life is hard is a sentence. Pain does this. It changes your perception of time. And clearly something has happened in the life of this particular writer that causes him to say in a moment of religious agony, how long is this going to last, God? This season I'm going through right now, where my life just isn't working, how long is this season going to last? When's it going to be over? When are things going to get better? How long am I going to have to put up with this and cry these tears and feel these pains? When's it over? Because I've had enough. And then he asks another slightly more pointed question. Still speaking to God, he says, will you forget me forever? Now this is quite an accusation, I think, because when you forget someone, it is because that someone has lost their earlier significance to you. For example, when you were at high school, you no doubt had a friend with whom you were very close. You sat together in class, you played together in the streets, you phoned one another all the time, you drank your first beer together, smoked your first cigarette together. You guys were close. Remember that friend? And then after high school, you went and did your thing, and your friend went away and did his thing, and your lives just naturally grew apart, and you got a new set of friends, and he got a new set of friends. And aside from the occasional walk down memory lane on Facebook, this friend just isn't important to you anymore. They're just not, because of the events of life, a significant other in your life. So what this person is saying to God is, when did that happen to me? Since when did I cease to matter? Since when was my life and my health and my happiness and my well-being of no interest to the God whom I always believed loved me and cared for me? In other words, God, why don't you care anymore? Then he asks another even more pointed question. How long will you hide your face from me? Quite an accusation this time, because to forget someone is usually just an innocent oversight. When you forget to keep in touch with your friend, when you don't get around to responding to their emails or their texts, when you forget to phone a buddy even when they're going through a hard time, there's usually no malice in your forgetfulness. It's just an accidental consequence of the busy life that you live. But to hide from someone, that's different. That's not accidental. That is a deliberate act of avoidance. It is to say, I've thought about it, and I'm choosing not to keep in touch with you. I've thought about it, and I'm choosing not to answer your emails. I've thought about it, and I'm choosing to ignore you. So what this man is saying is that not only do I feel that God has forgotten me, I feel that he has in fact chosen to forget me. I feel abandoned by the God whom I have always believed loved me. in the theological world of Hebrew poetry, to talk about what God knows and what God sees is not to talk about God's consciousness. It is always to talk about a prelude to action. For God to know something and to see something is to talk about what God does in response to what God knows and sees. And nothing will persuade you that your prayers are just a deluded conversation between you and your imaginary friend, quite like heaven's silent response to your latest calamity. It's unsettling. I mean, what gives here? I know that you know. I know that you know. So why is it you do nothing about what you know? Why do you deliberately hide from me at the very point in my life when I need you the most? Next sentence. How long must I wrestle with my thoughts, and day after day have sorrow in my heart? Now, if the answer to this question is just for a little while, or until this event happens, then I think we can cope. As a species, we are remarkably resilient, and we can go through any dark tunnel, provided there is a little bit of light at the end of it. However, the person who writes this sentence has none of that hope. And sometimes that's how it is. Sometimes there is no hope. When you lose somebody you love and they die, we know what this writer meant when he said that he had sorrow in his heart day after day, right? When the happy distraction of sleep leaves you, if you were lucky enough to get it, and you wake up in the morning with a messed up head and it hits you once more that today is another day without that man, without that woman. Lesser griefs are like this also. When a romance ends, when a job is lost, when security disappears, when a dream is broken, it breaks your heart, it messes with your mind, and it colours everything in your life a shade of black. When your head is a tangled web of inconsolable pain, when all your emotions are at the agonising end of the scale, it doesn't matter how refreshing the beer tastes, or how juicy the steak is, or how fit you are, or how attractive you happen to be, or how much money you've got in the bank at present. Because when you are in pain, pain is all that you feel. It becomes your reality. And I love that about this sentence. It's enormously honest and accurate. And then a final question that he asks. In my profession, we hesitate to use the word final because it gives you the hope that I'm going to stop talking soon. I'm not. It's the final question he asks, not the final things I have to say. But the final question he asks is somewhat defeatist. He says, how long will my enemy triumph over me? Now, I don't know who or what this man's enemy was, and I don't need to know, because to speak of the enemies that we have in life is to speak of 1,000 faces and 1,000 scenarios and 1,000 unfortunate events that can just turn your life on a dime and take you to a place where pain management is required. And it all leaves you wondering, how long? Here we are again. I'm in this season of pain. How long? I'm going through this. When am I going to be through it? The tunnel is dark. There is no light. When do I see some? And the frustrating thing, of course, is that all this can happen despite your best efforts, right? You can make really good decisions. You can invest in your relationships. You can treat people right. You can try and make good moral choices. You can watch what you eat. You can exercise regularly. You can do everything right. And all these excellent lifestyle choices that you think are taking your life in this direction, which is good, suddenly something happens and you discover that life has turned you around and now you're travelling in a direction that you didn't want to be travelling in. And when you're travelling in this direction that you didn't want to be travelling in, the only question in your head is, how long am I going this way? Because my plan is to go this way. This is plan A, now I'm on plan B, plan F, plan Z. This isn't good. Now so far, I think that everything that the man has said in this song is a little bit of a paradox, because he says what he says to a God whom he believes has turned away from him. He's speaking to a God whom he believes isn't listening anymore. Talking to a God who he believes isn't even looking anymore. At least that's what he says. In reality, this man's theology is pretty similar to my own, I suppose, in that he believes that God sees everything and knows everything. He knows that God knows that his life has taken a turn for the worst. His real problem is that God isn't doing anything about it. Have a look at this. This is the irony. This is the pain of the Bible. The pain of faith when you think deep enough about it. This is the blessing of the Jewish people. This is the big one. This comes from very early in the Bible story. This wasn't written by a well-meaning priest. It was, so the story goes, a sentence that was given by God to bless the people at the end of a church service, at the beginning of a new relationship, at the start of a new venture. God says, this is what I want you to say at the start of things, at the end of things, because this encapsulates where I'm at with my people. The Lord bless you and keep you. Now, you don't have to be a theologian to understand what that means. The Lord be good to you. The Lord be kind to you. The Lord lead your life to pleasant, sunlit uplands all the time. The Lord make his face to shine on you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face towards you and give you peace. Notice the double reference to the face of God. When I look at you, what am I saying? I'm interested in you. I see you. I hear you. May God do this to you. May he look deeply into your life with kindness in his eyes. Notice also in the three sentences the threefold repetition of the capital L-O-R-D. God is saying in these sentences, hey, it's me saying this. With my own name looking into your face, I am committing myself to your well-being, to your happiness, to your prosperity. And the problem, the painful problem that the writer of this morning's song is having is that he believes every word of this, but experiences none of it. To say that you believe that God is good and kind to you, and that he keeps you safe, and that his attention is always upon you, and that his intentions towards you are nothing but good, is to say that you believe in something that is evidently untrue. Right? That's just honest. To the man sitting on the ruined remains of his house in the Philippines, looking forlornly at the street upon which his children once played happily, this sentence is nothing more than a cruel insult. Where was the face of God then? Where was his kindness? Where was his good intentions when all that happened? It's an insult. And yet, for all of the bitterness and the irony, the writer of this song is still talking to God. What he's saying is angry and ugly, but at least he's saying something, and that's a start. When you feel pain, I think it's good to remember that you're feeling something, and feeling something is good, because to feel something you have to be alive. When you feel there's still life in your bones. Next sentence. Look on me and answer. So notice again the reference to the face of God. I offended an Italian gentleman once. I don't know if this is an Italian thing or not. I've never explored it, but I offended him once. And for about the next 3 or 4 months, in fact, I think still to this day. Yeah, still to this day. When he sees me walking down the street or happens to bang into me, he turns his face away from me. Is that a thing? I'm dead? It means I'm dead? I don't know what I did. Maybe I insulted his spaghetti. I don't know what I did. But you know this thing, like I'm walking down the street and it's like, you're dead to me. You don't exist to me. This is what this writer feels about God. God, you're doing this. Look on me. I'm over here. Look. Answer. And notice, please, also that he addresses God as capital L-O-R-D. If you were an ancient Hebrew and you used this word, capital L-O-R-D, you were using it to refer to God's personal name. Way back at the beginning of the Bible story, God introduces himself to Moses, and he says, "Hi, I'm God," and God says, "Hey," and Moses says, "Hi." This is a paraphrase. And Moses says, "Hey, so what should I call you? What's your name?" And God says something like, in Hebrew, "I am who I am." And this Hebrew phrase, "I am who I am," over centuries became condensed to the 4 letters L-O-R-D. So for an ancient Hebrew to use this name of God is to say, "I know who you are. I heard stories of you when I was a child. I've read tales of you in these ancient texts. I know something of who you are. I know that you are good. I know that you are kind. I know you. So will you not just look at me and be for me who I know you to be?" And so he says, what I want you to do, God whom I know, is to give light to my eyes. Beautiful phrase. Shakespeare said, remember that there's no art to discern the mind's construction in the face, and in most cases I suppose Shakespeare was right. The fact is you can't always tell how someone is doing by the way someone looks, but nonetheless sometimes you can, can't you? Sometimes you can just tell by looking into someone's eyes that things aren't right. You ever had that experience when you've been going through a hard time and you've been trying to hide it, and one of your close friends, what's going on? You all right? You don't look right. I can tell something's wrong. Sometimes you get so low that it shows somewhere in your face, and what this writer is saying is, I just can't hide it anymore. I've tried and I can't. My friends, my colleagues, they're all noticing that life has gone from my eyes. They can tell I'm dead inside, and God, if you don't do something, I will be dead inside. And then my enemy will say, I have overcome him. My foes will rejoice when I fall. Have you ever had a phone call from Germany, from a Mr. Schadenfreude? Ever had that experience where life just goes south on you? Bad things happen to you, and people take pleasure in your misery. And the worse things get for you, the happier they seem to be. There's this perverse enjoyment of the way your life has turned out of late. It's sickening stuff, and that's where this man is. I bet, in fact, that some of us in this room right now are dying inside and we've never told anyone because we're not quite sure how they would react, and that's bad enough, but how much worse would it be to be in a situation where, rather than extending sympathy to you, the people in your life, in fact, wished worse on you? They wished, in fact, that it would be good if you just hurried up and died. This is painful. When you're feeling that others are taking pleasure in your demise, what you're feeling is that your life simply doesn't matter anymore. To feel that others are somehow happy at your falling and your failing is in fact to feel that your being here at all has counted for nothing. This is a statement that stares deeply into the abyss and honestly questions everything that it once held dear. I used to believe in God. I used to believe that he was good. I used to believe that he cared. I used to believe that I had friends. I used to believe that my life mattered. And now all of that is up for grabs. I just don't know anymore. So picture the scene. A man who used to believe in the goodness of God is asking tough questions. Questions that have been forced upon him by the ugliness of life. I used to believe that my life was important to you. I used to believe that I mattered. I used to believe that there was a plan, that there was a purpose. And now I'm in a place where the people around me are enjoying my demise and wishing me dead. And dark as it is, I mean, this is Smith's music stuff. This is dark. I still like the spirituality of it because it's honest. But in its honesty, it never completely succumbs to the abyss into which it stares. Next sentence. But, important word. Sometimes the word but is profoundly important. When life is dark and there is no hope, there is always, I think, some hope to be found. So he says, but, shaking himself out of it a bit, I trust in your unfailing love. My heart rejoices in your salvation. The great irony of this sentence, of course, is that nothing at all has changed. From verse 1 to verse 5, not one iota of this man's misery has changed to even the slightest degree. This is still a father holding on to his daughter, wondering how he's going to get through the next hour. This is still a man looking at the ruined remains of the house in which his children once lived and the street upon which they once happily played. This is still a man with cancer. This is still a person who's lost someone, who's struggling, who's lonely, who's desperate. All of that is still true. Nothing has changed, except that he realizes that the choice to have faith in a better tomorrow or not is still his to make. And so he says, although I experience none of these things at the moment, I will still trust in your love. It's dogged stuff. Stuff that says this man knows two things. He knows that life is full of painful paradoxes. He knows that the ugliness of all this often raises questions that just can't be answered sensibly. For him, trying to think through the dilemma of which is true, is God unwilling or unable to help me, is not an academic exercise for Sunday morning. This is the reality in which he lives. He knows that the life he lives is often at odds with the good God in whom he believes. But that's not all he knows. He clings on to this belief that beyond the paradox, beyond the pain, there is still this God who nevertheless is still good. And that God, he believes, has yet to speak the final word. So if you want a lesson, and sometimes there isn't a lesson, but if you want one, there is one here. You will agree with me when I say that life is hard. And you will further agree with me, I hope, when I say that sometimes life just stays hard. Sometimes it goes south and never turns north again. Sometimes it gets bad and it just stays bad. That's true. Nonetheless, the optimism of all this is to say that whatever twists and turns your life has taken, the story of your life isn't finished yet, nor can it be fully understood until the last act of the last chapter. An act that I trust and I hope, along with this writer, that if not in this life, then in the next, will cast a new light upon your present darkness, that will make sense of it. And so in the last sentence in his song, he looks forward to better days. He says, I will sing. Sense the determination in the word will. I will. At the moment, no, but I will sing the Lord's praise, for he has been good to me. Well, actually, that's not true, is it? He hasn't been good. This whole song has lamented the absence of such things. And yet in this beautiful twist, he says, you know, guys, I know this has been a sad song, I get that, but for me to write anything other than a sad song would be for me to be less than honest, because that's how I feel. But I've got no intention of allowing my present feelings to rob me of the hope of a better future. And so I give you fair warning. It's been sad so far, but there will come a day, when I will sit down with pen in hand and paper in front of me, and I will write a happier song than this and tell a happier tale. The song that tells the story of how God made it all right, of how it all worked out. And so, I would invite you and myself to do what this part of the Bible does. I would invite you to be honest with God. Any form of spirituality that pretends that the world is something other than it is a spirituality of the make-believe, and therefore entirely nonsense. I hate, and I mean what I say, I hate forms of Christianity that fictitiously give the impression that Jesus will make everything okay. Because Jesus just doesn't make everything okay. And to suggest that Jesus does make everything okay is to make claims for Jesus that Jesus never once made for himself. It is to suggest that belief in Christ somehow magically raises you above the vagrancies of life. And it doesn't. It didn't for the first generation of Christians, and it doesn't for us. The truth, however ugly, however unpalatable, is always more beautiful because it's true. So go ahead. It's all right. It's Christian. It's proper. Rage against what's going on in your life. Rage against the loneliness, the illness, the tragedy, the pain. Rage against the injustices and the unfairnesses that have been perpetuated against you. Rage at how horrible your life is and how sadly and pathetically it seems to end. And at the end of your raging, when you're done, when you've got it all out, when you've been honest, when you've been true, believe again, or for the first time, that waiting for you at the end of it all is a God with arms stretched open and his face locked firmly upon yours. A God who promises you a future undiminished by sadness and unaffected by the failures and the disappointments and the fallings of this life. Any questions?
You stated in one of your final statements, life is bad. What I got today was that God should be there, and God isn't there. I'm finding that we create the badness in our life. And so when things are going great, God's kind of, from God in the Spirit. When things are really bad, we expect God to come into our life. What do you think of that?
Did you all hear the question?
Sorry. Like my question is that life isn't really bad because we created it. We created it through our choices and our decisions throughout our life. And bad, we're expecting God to come into it, to kind of be our Savior. But in reality, we can solve the badness because it's what we created. We should be thanking God for the good end of that, because not just the bad. I just believe that we go to God only when it's bad, and we got to go to God even when it's great, and even when it's bad, every day.
Okay, that's excellent. But I think only half true, and the half that's
You're going to have another technical
you're dead to me.
half true.
Leave the gun, take the cannoli.
Sorry.
No, I think it's half true, and I think the half that is true is excellent and worth remembering. Some of the junk that happens to us is junk that we cause, right? We get ourselves into bother and mea culpa, and there's just no point pretending otherwise. And there is stuff we can do about that. However, what about the guy sitting on the roof of the ruins of a house in the Philippines? Did he cause this? Well, of course not. And it's for that reason that I really despise all that secret stuff that was big a few years ago in Oprah. Remember that? You deserve it and the universe serves it. Well, what about cancer? What about motor neuron disease? What about the fact that my child was born with a tremendous disability? What about the fact the economy took a nosedive and suddenly I'm in this situation? Well, I didn't do that. That stuff's not my fault. So I think it's fair to say, yeah, some stuff in life, yeah, it's your fault. It really is. And it's good to know that, and it's good to own it. But it's really not helpful to feel guilt for things that have gone wrong in your life that just aren't your fault, and that you can't do anything about. So the bit that you said that was true is excellent, and the bit that you said that wasn't true is not good. Really, after that, you want?
The man is standing there looking. I know he didn't have a choice, but I believe that if we as a world have created this, or have got free will, maybe some of what we did to this earth, and God gave it as pure as possible, we created the effects of these terrible things in life.
So, still no. No, I'll tell you why. We happen to live in a world. So I guess the question in a nutshell was, if we all just made better choices, then we've created the effects of all this. For example, that can't be true, and I'll tell you why. It is necessary for survival on this world to have moving tectonic plates. If there aren't moving tectonic plates, life on Earth isn't possible. And moving tectonic plates, we know, are one of the things that cause earthquakes and tidal waves and so on. So we may wonder what it would be like to live in a world like that, but we don't know because it doesn't exist. And so even if everyone got together and tried to make better choices, which is it's good to remember that we do have free will, but only to an extent. We still live in a world and endure a life that sooner or later, for many at least, is going to do bad things to us. That is a reality. And it doesn't matter how wise your choices are. For some people, you're going to get kicked. Mary, back row. Always the bad ones on the back row. What? No. Yeah, I think I can actually. So this song that Broman sang, there was this old guy, I don't know, 18th century or something. House burnt down in Chicago, so lost everything, lost most things. And so he sends his wife and kids over to England for a holiday, and he's going to tie up business and he'll join them. So why am I doing this? They're sailing on the ocean. If they didn't do that, you wouldn't know. They're sailing on the ocean, and the boat sinks, and his two kids are drowned, but his wife survives. And then he goes over to England on the next boat, and the next boat owned by the same company stops at the point where the previous boat sank, just and has a service. And at the end of that service, he goes and writes this song as well, "With my soul." So it comes from pain, and it's worth remembering that there are many beautiful things in life that come from pain. When life is easy all the time, we're not pushed, we're not stretched. Pain does good things to us sometimes. It sends us deeper and wider. So it's a good thing. One more.
There's a song by a band called Talking Heads called Heaven. And in the song it says, "Heaven's a place where nothing ever happens." And is it possible that I sometimes look upon this life, and I don't know if the word I'll use will describe it properly, is kind of like a vacation from heaven, where nothing ever happens. Maybe this is a place where there's supposed to be all sorts of extreme experiences. That's part of being alive.
Yeah, maybe. Don't know. I certainly enjoy weeks where nothing happens. Don't you? When you've gone through stuff and life's been bad, and someone asks, "So, how's things been?" "Oh, it's been great. Nothing's happened this week." Do you know what I mean? So, nothing's happened. It's good. How's life? Boring. Bring it on. Okay. Okay, one more.
Okay, so my question is, you said...
Oh, okay. Always suspicious of questions that start with okay.
You said that we can never have, joy in the midst of, pain and struggles. That we're going to be angry and it doesn't exist a Christianity that brings you joy in the midst of it.
No, I don't think I did say
No, I
that.
don't think so. Can you explain to me what you said then? Because that's why I go off.
Well, I can't explain what I didn't say, so it's quite difficult.
Do you know what I was saying? You said something about how you said there's a Christianity that people say exists that doesn't exist.
Oh,
That one doesn't. Sorry.
no. Let me look at what I said again. So yes, what I said was I don't like forms of Christianity that gives the impression that Jesus will make everything okay. So, it's quite a bold thing to say, because it's probably the predominant expression of Christianity in North America at the moment. If you believe in Jesus, then life will be great, and bad things won't happen, and you'll be healthy, and your sicknesses will go away, and your personal prosperity will go fantastic, and so on and so forth. I hate that for two reasons. Number one, it's biblically untrue. And number two, it's observably untrue. So, the early apostles, for example, did not have the experience where Jesus made everything okay. They may have had their faith, they may have had their joy in it, but nonetheless, they were fed to lions, they were tortured, they existed in poverty, they had fractured relationships and so on. So there are huge elements of their life where Jesus just didn't make everything okay. In fact, Jesus made things worse. Or at least following Jesus made things worse. And as far as our lives are concerned, where I say that that's observably untrue, well, it just is. I mean, you don't need to think too deeply about it to think about a Christian sub-Saharan Africa, whose family have been taken away by Joseph Kony and his cronies in Uganda, and the children are forced into servitude as child soldiers, and people are raped and killed and tortured and so on, even though they believe in Christ. So, joy in the middle of it, yeah, maybe, but Jesus making everything okay. I think that's promising more than the faith delivers, and it's promising something that the faith never claimed to deliver. Jesus didn't promise some of the things that the church today say that he promised. Just didn't. It's a good exercise to read through the Gospels and kind of pretend it's your first time, and it really hits you at how shocking Jesus' words are, and how stark and how unsanitized they are in comparison to what's put out by the church today. Let me pray. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord be gracious to you. Make his face to shine upon you. And may he turn his face toward you and give you his peace.